President-elect Donald Trump, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here. You are the first president since Grover Cleveland to win non-consecutive terms. Republicans now have control of the House and the Senate.
Right.
What do you plan to accomplish in your first 100 days in office?
Well, we're going to do something with the border, and very strong, very powerful. That'll be our first signal, and the first signal to America that we're not playing games. We have people coming in by the millions, as you know, and a lot of people shouldn't be here. Most of them shouldn't be here, but we have jails being emptied into our country. We have mental institutions from all over the world being emptied into our country. So we'll be doing that. We're going to be extending within that period, or as soon as we can, the Trump tax cuts, because, you know, they're coming due and they're very substantial for people. And it would be very, I think it will anger a lot of people, frankly, if we don't get an extension of that. That's what led us to one of the greatest economies ever. And those two things are going to be very vital, very important. We're going to be focusing on crime in the cities, and we'll work with Democrat governors. Most of them are, as you know, if you look at the 25 worst places, they're just about all Democrat-controlled cities and states. And we're going to be working with Democrat governors and Democrat mayors. And I look forward to doing it, but we have to do something about crime, and mostly in our cities. And we're going to have a lot of other things. We'll be working on nominations. We're going to still be working on some nominations. I think they're going very well. We have, for the most part, I think they're going extremely well. It looks like Peter's doing well now. I mean, people were a little bit concerned. He's a young guy with a tremendous track record, actually. He went to Princeton and went to Harvard. He was a good student at both, but he loves the military, and I think people are starting to see it. So we'll be working on his nomination along with a lot of others.
We are going to delve into your nominations, but since you bring him up, do you still have confidence in Pete Hegseth?
Yes, I do. I really do. He's a very smart guy. I've known him through Fox, but I've known him for a long time. And he's basically a military guy. I mean, every time I talk to him, all he wants to talk about is the military. He's a military guy. I used to kid him about it. I didn't think would be in this position where he may be, hopefully will be Secretary of Defense. But every time I was with him, he was fighting for soldiers, where he said some soldier was unjustly put in prison because they were really doing what they were taught to do, in some cases. So, yeah, I think he's going to do fine.
The fact that there are these allegations against him, misconduct, sexual misconduct, heavy drinking, the fact that he said to some senators reportedly he'll stop drinking if he gets this job, does that worry you?
No, I think that everybody has something that they can stop. Some people can stop eating. I'm lucky I'm not a drinker, but I could stop eating. And we all want to stop doing something. And if he said that, I mean, it's a nice thing to say. That's a good thing to say. But he's very respected. I can tell you, I know a lot of the people at Fox, they think he's fantastic. And the people that work with him, really, they love him. So I think you're going to have somebody that's really terrific. And again, all he talked about with me, I said, you know, you're not really a television guy, even though he did very well, as you know. You're really a military guy. He said, I'm all about the military. And I told him, so he's making a lot of money at Fox. They're doing very well. And I said, you know, if for some reason you don't get this thing, you're not going to be able to go back. And all that money you're making, you can kiss it goodbye. He said, this is all about America. You know, he didn't say, well, let me think about it. Let me discuss it. That's a very big, risky thing he's doing. When he goes and he says, I'm going to give up, you know, millions of dollars in order to possibly become the Secretary of Defense. A lot of people would say it's a great position. It's probably almost no greater position, but a lot of people would say, I have to think about it. He said, I don't have to think about it.
All right, we're going to delve into your cabinet picks a little bit later, but I want to delve into one of your signature promises on the campaign trail, which was to end inflation, to lower prices. You are now proposing tariffs against the United States' three biggest trading partners. Economists of all stripes say that ultimately consumers pay the price of tariffs.
I don't believe
Can you guarantee American families won't pay more?
I can't guarantee anything. I can't guarantee tomorrow. But I can say that if you look at just pre-COVID, we had the greatest economy in the history of our country. And I had a lot of tariffs on a lot of different countries, but in particular China. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars, and we had no inflation. In fact, when I handed it over, they didn't have inflation for a year and a half. They went almost 2 years just based on what I had created. And then they created inflation with energy and with spending too much. So I think I'm a big believer in tariffs. I think tariffs are the most beautiful word. I think they're beautiful. It's going to make us rich. We're subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year. We're subsidizing Mexico for almost $300 billion. We shouldn't be subsidizing. Why are we subsidizing these countries? If we're going to subsidize them, let them become a state. We're subsidizing Mexico, and we're subsidizing Canada, and we're subsidizing many countries all over the world. And all I want to do is I want to have a level, fast, but fair playing field.
Sir, your previous tariffs during your first administration cost Americans some $80 billion. And now you have major companies from Walmart, Black & Decker, AutoZone saying that any tariffs are going to force them to drive up prices for their consumers. How do you make sure that these CEOs, that these companies don't, in fact, pass on the cost of tariffs to their consumers?
They cost Americans nothing. They made a great economy for us. They also solve another problem. If we were going to have problems having to do with wars and having to do with other things, tariffs, I have stopped wars with tariffs by saying, you guys want to fight, it's great, but both of you are going to pay tariffs to the United States at 100%. And they have many purposes, tariffs, if properly used. I don't say you use them like a madman. I say properly used. But it didn't cost this country anything. It made this country money. And we never really got the chance to go all out because we had to fight COVID in the last part. And we did it very successfully. And when I handed it over to Biden, the stock market was higher than what it was just previous to COVID coming in. It was actually higher. Tariffs are properly used, are a very powerful tool, not only economically, but also for getting other things outside of economics.
Well, again, prices did go up on some goods in your first administration, washing machines, tires. Will you punish CEOs?
Let me just explain to you. No. You mentioned washing machines. So you look at Whirlpool in Ohio. I got a call from Jim Jordan, one of the greats, congressman from Ohio. And he said, they're going out of business because South Korea and China are dumping washing machines into our country. And I put a 50% tariff on the washing machines coming in from China and South Korea. And Whirlpool and the companies that made washing machines, which are based in Ohio, largely based in Ohio, went through the roof. We saved thousands of jobs, tens of thousands of jobs. They were all going out of business because they were dumping washing machines. And when I put the tariffs on, they became successful businesses. No, it didn't. Not only didn't it cost people, it made our country stronger and more powerful, and it kept jobs.
But how do you make sure that consumers don't wind up paying more? Will you punish CEOs who try to pass the cost of tariffs on to their customers?
Well, the market's going to take care of it. I mean, actually, the market takes care of it. And if it doesn't, we adjust it somewhat. But in the case of Whirlpool, or let's say companies that made washing machines, they were all being put out of business by the dumping from, in particular, South Korea and China. And when I put the tariffs on, very substantial tariffs, although peanuts compared to what people do to us, what countries do to us, it became a very, very powerful, successful company. Now, let's say I didn't do the tariffs. It would have gone out of business. You would have lost tens of thousands of jobs, and you don't include that in your equation. No, they make a lot of money. I'll go a step further. Tariffs are going to make our country rich. Tariffs are going to help us pay off $35 trillion in debt. Tariffs are going to make our country safe because China, as an example, doesn't want to play games with us if we're going to do tariffs on them. They don't want to play games. And we have a lot of games being played on us right now.
Well, I think, and that takes me to my next question. Yeah. Are you actually going to impose these tariffs, or are they a negotiating tactic?
Well, I'll give you an example. With Canada, and in particular Mexico, We have millions of people pouring into our country. You agree with that. I spoke with I spoke with Justin Trudeau. In fact, he flew to Mar-a-Lago within about 15 seconds after the call ended. Yeah. He was at Mar-a-Lago. We were having dinner talking about it. I said, you have to close up your borders because they're coming in the northern border, too, a lot. Not like the southern border, but they're coming in the Canadian border a lot. And drugs are pouring in. Almost as importantly, drugs are pouring in. Maybe more importantly, drugs are pouring in at levels never seen before, 10 times what we had. They're just pouring in. We can't have open borders. And I said to the president of Mexico and to Justin Trudeau, if it doesn't stop, I'm going to put tariffs on your country at about 25%. That's a very substantial tariff. And in the case of, in both cases, but in the case where it was really visible, within 10 minutes after that phone call, we noticed that the people coming across the border, the southern border, having to do with Mexico, they were at a trickle, just a trickle. It was, in fact, I call the border. See, unlike my opponent, I do call the border a lot. And I said, how's the border looking today? They said, there's nobody here. They couldn't believe it. The military stopped these vast groups of people. You know, we call them caravans, but they had caravans of people, and they largely stopped them. Now, they're going to have to continue that, but if they don't continue, and the other thing I told them is no more drugs. And I told that to China, too. I had to deal with President Xi. Had the election been different, I'm going to be very nice because we don't have to get into an argument over 2020. But had the election been different, the result been different, we would have had China giving their maximum penalty, which is the penalty of death, to people that sent fentanyl into this country. But Biden didn't, unfortunately, finish that discussion up. I had an agreement with President Xi, who I got along with very well. We've had communication as recently as this week. And I had communication with him where they were going to give the death penalty to anybody sending drugs into the United States.
This week you had that conversation.
Not that conversation, but I had other conversations. Okay. But in the past, I've had that conversation.
Let me ask you about another aspect of the economy, sir, the minimum wage. The federal minimum wage has been $7.25 since 2009. There are 20 states that still have the federal minimum wage at $7.25. And I actually have a map. 19 of these states actually voted for you, sir. Mm-hmm. And you can see it right here. I don't know if you remember this, but during the debate in 2020, I asked you if you would raise the minimum wage. You said you would consider it. And so my question for you is, now that you are going back to the White House, for these 19 states that voted for you, are you going to raise the federal minimum wage? It's a very
low number. I will agree. It's a very low number. Let me give you the downside, though. Yeah. In California, they raised it up to a very high number. And your restaurants are going out of business all over the place. The population is shrinking. It's had a very negative impact. But there is a level at which you could do it, absolutely. Yeah.
What is that level, do you
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I can say this. You have a lot of businesses that are open and thriving because of the lower minimum wage. If you raise it too much, and you understand this, if California went crazy, they went crazy. And people, the restaurants are closing all over. Many more people are hurt.
So I hear you saying, similarly to sort of what you said in 2020, will you consider it? Is this something you're going to look at?
I'd want to speak to the governors. And the other thing that's very complicated about minimum wages is places are so different. Mississippi and Alabama and great places are very different than New York or California. I mean, in terms of the cost of living and other things. So it would be nice to have just a minimum wage for the whole country, but it wouldn't work because you have places where it's very inexpensive to live, where a minimum wage, which is $8 or $9, might be, might have very little effect because the cost of living in certain places is really low.
Before we move on to immigration, which I do want to talk about, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, said he will not leave his post even if you ask him to. Will you try to replace Jerome Powell?
No, I don't think so. I don't see it. But I think if I told him to, he would. But if I asked him to, he probably wouldn't. But if I told him to, he would.
You don't have plans to do that right now?
No, I don't.
Okay, let's talk about mass deportation, one of your big agenda items. You've talked about prioritizing people who have criminal histories.
Correct.
But is it your plan to deport everyone who who is here illegally over the next 4 years?
Well, I think you have to do it. And it's a very tough thing to do. But you have to have, you have rules, regulations, laws. They came in illegally. The people that have been treated very unfairly are the people that have been online for 10 years to come into the country. And we're going to make it very easy for people to come in terms of they have to pass the test. They have to be able to tell you what the Statue of Liberty is. They have to tell you a little bit about our country. They have to love our country. They can't come out of prisons. We don't want people that are in for murder. So we had 11,000 and 13,000 different estimates, 13,099 murderers released into our country over the last 3 years. They're walking down the streets. They're walking next to you and your family, and they're very dangerous.
The 13,000 figure, I think, goes back about 40 years.
No, it doesn't. No,
that
it's within the 3-year period.
figure.
It's during the Biden term. No, that was a fiction that they put that out. This was done by the Border Patrol. It's 13,099, and it's during the Biden period of time. And these are murderers, many of whom murdered more than one person. You don't want those people in this country.
But you're saying something, sir, that's significant. I just want to make sure I'm clear, which is that you're saying, yes, you're going to focus on the people with criminal histories, but everyone who's here illegally has to go.
I'm saying this. We have to get the criminals out of our country. We have to get people that were taken out of mental institutions and put them back into their mental institution, no matter what country it is. Do you know that Venezuela, their prisons are at the lowest point in terms of emptiness that they've ever been? They're taking their people out of those prisons by the thousands, and they're drunk. And just to get back, because I know exactly what you're getting at. Number one, we're doing criminals, and we're going to do them really rapidly. We're getting the worst gang probably with MS-13, and the Venezuelan gangs are the worst in the world. They're vicious, violent people. And you see what they've done in Colorado and other places. They're taking over, literally taking over apartment complexes and doing it with impunity. They don't care. They couldn't. They just are. They're in the real estate business.
The local police say that is not the case in Colorado.
Oh, it's totally the case. I mean, I have it
you
on
don't
tape.
believe the local police.
I play it. I used to play it at my rallies every single night. No, they're breaking into doors. They're taking over the building.
But sir, you
and by the way, the
point,
police are afraid to do anything.
You raised the point that the logistics are complicated. You said
Sure
it yourself.
They are, but everything's complicated.
Yeah, you mean you need 24 times more ICE detention capacity just to deport 1 million people per year, not to mention more agents, more judges, more planes. Is it realistic to deport everyone who's here illegally?
You have no choice. First of all, they're costing us a fortune. But we're starting with the criminals, and we got to do it. And then we're starting with others, and we're going to see how it goes.
Who are the others?
Others are other people outside of criminals. We have convicted murders. We don't mean people that are even on trial. We have people that have murdered numerous people are on our streets and in our farms, and we have to get them out of our country.
What about dreamers, sir? Dreamers who were brought to this country illegally as children. You said once back in 2017, they, quote, shouldn't be very worried about being deported. Should they be worried now?
The dreamers are going to come later, and we have to do something about the dreamers because these are people that have been brought here at a very young age, and many of these are middle-aged people now. They don't even speak the language of their country. And yes, we're going to do something about the dreamers.
What does that mean?
And
what are you going to do?
I will work with the Democrats on a plan, and if we can come up with a plan, but the Democrats have made it very, very difficult to do anything. Republicans are very open to the dreamers. The dreamers, we're talking many years ago, they were brought into this country, many years ago. Some of them are no longer young people, and in many cases, they become successful. They have great jobs. In some cases, they have small businesses. Some cases, they might have large businesses. And we're going to have to do something with them. And
you want them to be able to stay. That's what you're saying?
I do. Okay. I want to be able to work something out. And it should have been able to be worked out over the last 3 or 4 years. And it never got worked out. You know, Biden could have done it because he controlled, Congress to a certain extent, right? He could have done something, but they didn't do it. I never understood why, because they always seem to want to do it, but then when it comes down to it, they don't. I think we can work with the Democrats and work something out.
Let me ask you about another group of people, the estimated 4 million families in America who have mixed immigration status. So I'm talking about parents who might be here illegally, but the kids are here legally. Your borders are
You're talking about separation.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are two aspects to this. Your borders are, Tom Homan said, they can be deported together.
Correct.
Is that the plan?
Well, that way you keep the, well, I don't want to be breaking up families. So the only way you don't break up the family is you keep them together, and you have to send them all back.
Even kids who are here legally?
Well, what you're going to do if they want to stay with the father? Look, we have to have rules and regulations. You can always find something out like, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. I'll tell you what's going to be horrible. When we take a wonderful young woman who's with a criminal, and they show the woman, and she could stay by the law, but they show the woman being taken out, or they want her out, and your cameras are focused on her as she's crying, as she's being taken out of our country, and then the public turns against us. But we have to do our job, and you have to have a series of standards and a series of laws. And in the end, look, our country is a mess. We have the highest crime rate, and during the debate, a man whose ratings have gone way down, David Muir, said to me, no, crime is, because I had to debate 3 people, not 1. Debating 1 was easy. Debating 3 was actually pretty easy, too, if you want to know the truth. But David Muir said, the crime rates have gone down. I said, no, they've gone up. And then the following day, they released the crime rates, and they were way up.
Yeah, and the FBI statistics, you're talking about those FBI statistics.
Well, no, but he gave the wrong answer.
Confusing based on what you're looking at.
But a lot of that is migrant crime.
Let me ask you about another aspect of this.
Kristen, a lot of it's migrant crime.
Well, let me ask you about another aspect of this that I think a lot of people are really curious about. I mean, 3% of the people who are here illegally have criminal histories. But in your first administration, you had the zero tolerance policy, where we did see family separations.
Yeah.
You ended it. The purpose of that, though, to some extent, and you talked about this at the time, was deterrent.
You also had it with Obama. You do know that.
He didn't have a zero tolerance policy.
And you also know he built the jails for children.
He didn't have a zero tolerance policy.
But in 2014, he built the jails. You know that.
I want to ask you about the zero tolerance policy. I mean, he didn't have a systemic, we're going to separate families. Families were separated when parents were a threat to the kids.
We don't have to separate a family. Excuse me, Kristen.
Yeah.
We don't have to separate families. Yeah. We'll send the whole family very humanely back to the country where they came. That way the family's not separated.
So no more family separations. You're not reviving the zero tolerance policy.
Well, it depends on the family. The family may decide to say, I'd rather have Dad go, and we'll stay here. And in which case they have that option.
But you're not going to revive your zero tolerance policy, which was put in place as a deterrent. Is there any universe where you would bring that back, sir?
We need deterrence. Look, ready? When somebody comes here illegally, they're going out. It's very simple. When they come here illegally, they're going out. Now, if they come here illegally, but their family is here legally, then the family has a choice. The person that came in illegally can go out, or they can all go out together. And that was made very clear by Tom Homan. So
you're not, at this point in time, planning to revive that zero tolerance policy where kids are separated?
Well, if you call that, yeah, I'm doing what I just told you I'm going to do. I don't want to send the family out. I don't want to send anybody out. But I'll tell you, we have to, because otherwise we have no country. If we don't have borders, and if we don't have voting, good voting, fair voting, do you know they're still counting votes in San Diego, California? Listen, they're still counting the votes. This is almost 4 weeks. They're still counting the votes. If we don't have fair elections and honest voting and machines that work quickly, if you had paper ballots, every election will be over by 10 o'clock in the evening.